What's up, everybody? Good Thursday evening, and welcome to the Porch. It is Volquest baseball podcast, presented as always by my good friends over at Spivey, King and Spivey LLP. If you got a problem, let them find a solution for you. T and Trial Lawyers. They specialize in DUI, homicide, assaults, car wrecks, accidents, injuries, divorce, custody of your children, alimony, all that and more. If you have a need, you can give them a call today for a free consultation at 423-245-4185 or online at SpiveyKingandSpiveyLLP.com. Couldn't do this show without our friends over at Spivey King and Spivey LLP. Man, do we have a big show coming up. Obviously, a huge weekend here on Rocky Top. Tennessee hosting the Knoxville Regional. Tennessee drew the number 1 overall seed as expected. Wrote about it in the 3-2-1. No surprises there. Coming off an SEC tournament championship run in Hoover last weekend. Co-SEC champions in the regular season. Tennessee's got a 50-11 record. It's a really, really good ball club. So no surprise there that Tennessee drew the number 1 overall seed. Now, as we've alluded to a little bit, it's been since 1999 since the number 1 overall seed has won the national championship, and I don't think that this team's worried about that, nor should they be worried about that. One year does not correlate to the next, but trend's a trend, and it just kind of is what it is. Wouldn't it be something for this Tennessee team to maybe snap that, buck that trend a little bit? But, of course, you got to take it one game at a time, and you got to make it out of regional play. Tennessee will host Northern Kentucky on Friday night, 7 o'clock on the SEC Network. Tennessee, the winners of that game and the game beforehand, Southern Miss and Indiana, which takes place at 1 o'clock on ESPN+. The winners of those games will go on to play Saturday night at 6 o'clock. The losers of those games will go on to play at noon on Saturday, and, of course, that is an elimination game. The winner of the Saturday night game will take on the loser of that first game on Saturday. That'll be the first game of the two losing teams who are, on the brink of elimination, essentially, will square off in another elimination game on Sunday. And then, of course, the winner will have the nightcap on Sunday nights. And if you win 3 in a row, an opportunity to close out the Knoxville Regional on Sunday night. You have a Monday game if necessary, and that game would no time yet, but likely, noon or 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So we'll get going. We're going to dive into who this Knoxville Regional is. Northern Kentucky, Indiana, Southern Miss. We're going to hear from Luke Lipsius and get his thoughts on what happened at Hoover in the SEC tournaments. What's to come, the mindset for regional play, all that and more. And then we're going to speak with Joe Healey of D1 Baseball. I saw him earlier in the season at Kentucky, and I said, hey, man, leading up to regional weekend, I want to have you on the porch, and just so you can kind of break down Tennessee's draw, and specifically some of the teams that Tennessee's going to be playing, because I cover Tennessee. I don't cover those teams. So really good stuff coming up from Joe Healey. And spoiler alert, he picks Tennessee to win it all. So a lot of good stuff from Joe Healey of D1 Baseball coming up later in the show. It's a little bit of a longer show, but I don't think you guys would mind that whatsoever. Without further ado, let's get into it. Southern Miss, a little bit lazy on the NCAA's part, in my opinion. Tennessee and Southern Miss just squared off in Super Regional play last year, and it was dramatic and it was fun. This Southern Miss team is a good baseball team, and typically if you're a number 2 seed in any region, you're not bad. You're a pretty good baseball team. Tennessee was a pretty good baseball team last year. But, you just kind of get lazy, right? If you're trying to grow the game, which, a storyline of Tennessee the Knoxville Regional matching up with the Greenville Regional of Eastern Carolina, that number 2 seed in that region is Wake Forest. And, of course, everybody and their mother knew that was going to happen at some point back in February or March, that whether it would be the 2 seed in Tennessee's region or, Wake would get a regional or whatever, that Tennessee and Wake would have the opportunity potentially, if they handle business, to square off with one another. And, of course, that storyline of Chase Burns potentially coming back to Lindsey Nelson Stadium. Gotta win this regional first to even worry about that. But my point is, that you want ratings, you want storylines, and that's fun. But, we just had Tennessee and Southern Miss. And, Tennessee shouldn't be scared of Southern Miss. Don't get me wrong, and I don't think it is. Southern Miss is a really good ball club, but Southern Miss is good. 8 straight seasons, they won 40 games. That's the longest active streak in Division I baseball. They've won 15 of the last 16 ball games. Dramatic fashion to win the Sun Belt tournament. They finished second in the regular season. It's a really, really good ball club. You've got Billy Oldman, who's kind of the ace of the staff, and at the time of this recording, I'm not sure if he's going to pitch the first game on Friday, or if they're going to hold him to pitch against Tennessee potentially on Saturday. I don't know yet, but he's really good. 7-2, a 3.97 ERA. If it's not Billy Oldham, of course, Tennessee knows all about Nico Mazza. 8-3 record, a 4.43 ERA. Tennessee saw him last year at Southern Miss. He's a really, really good arm that Tennessee could potentially square off against on Saturday night. But they've got a lot of players that made the All Sun Belt team, and they're a team that pitches at a 5 ERA and a team that hits at a 2.94 ERA. They've got the 26th ranked RPI in the country because they play midweeks a lot more than Tennessee does in terms of quality of competition. Their strength of schedule is top 50 in the country. I mean, that's a really, really good ball team. And you'd expect nothing less with a new first-year skipper taking over for Scott Bell last year. But nonetheless, solid baseball team, and I fully expect Tennessee and Southern Miss to battle out to see who's the champion of this region. But potentially that Southern Miss team would come later in the weekend. The team that Tennessee is going to face for sure right out of the gate is going to be Northern Kentucky. This Northern Kentucky team can hit. This Northern Kentucky team cannot pitch. That's as simple as I can phrase it. You look at, their team ERA is 7.37. That's in the 200s, guys. Their season average, 3.20. That's a couple points higher than Tennessee's. They're 5th in the nation in scoring runs. Tennessee's 4th in the nation. They're 11 behind Tennessee, but top 5 team in the nation in scoring runs. I mean, they're top 5. They're top 10 in the nation in team batting average, in team OBP, in team slugging. I mean, they're a really good hitting ball club. However, they don't play the cream of the crop, and so as Luke will mention here in a moment, it's kind of hard to dissect. How good are you? Because are these stats inflated against weaker competition, or are you a pretty good ball club? We'll find out. Wright State was pretty daggone good. And Tony Vitello said, we 100% for certainty did not inherit the 64 best team in the field in Northern Kentucky. I mean, he was talking to us, off camera, even after the interviews on Wednesday afternoon, and saying, I keep doing these interviews and everything, and they're trying to get me to, kind of talk up to my opponent and everything. And I'm like, no, they are good. They are good. And maybe that's still coach speak. But we're going to find out how good Northern Kentucky is. And Joe Healey's going to say in a moment, best phrase that he came up with was like, this is a team that'll scare you for 4 or 5 innings if they come out hot. But Tennessee should be able to handle some business. 147th in the RPI, 276th in the strength of schedule. 0-6 is the quad 1 record. Again, a team that's got an ERA in the 7s, but a team that can hit at 3.20 on the season. Really, really solid hitting baseball team. You've got a righty in Tanner Gillis who will make the start against Tennessee. He is 8-2 on the year, a 4.60 ERA. That is who Tennessee will see starting this baseball game, as Tanner Gillis. Some guys coming out of the bullpen. Nick McClanahan, 2-4, 7.21 ERA. He's got 4 saves. Aaron Massey, 3-3, 3.16 ERA. He has 5 saves. So they got a couple of nice, bullpen options, as Joe will allude to here in a moment. But it's a team that up and down the lineup, they run as well. 125 stolen bases on the season. That ranks 12th in the nation. So Tennessee, it's going to be a lot of throws over to first, some back picks and everything, because Tennessee pitchers are slow to the plate. I don't want to say by design, but that's just kind of how it is every single year. So that's why you see so many pickoffs, for Xander, for Drew Beam, and for Stom over to first base, because they're trying to control those runners. And they're going to have to do that in a big way, because 125 stolen bases on the year for Northern Kentucky. I expect this to be a high-scoring game, at least in the first few innings, and then I expect Tennessee to take over. I truly do. I do think that Tennessee will go in, and I asked Tony Vitello this question on Wednesday on the record, and I said, hey, do you make any changes to your starting pitching rotation, or do you leave it as is, kind of entering a weekend like this? And he said, no, not much changing. We got to treat it like any other weekend. So, I fully expect Stamos to get the start on Friday. And, of course, we'll get word about that on Friday as well. But Stamos to get the start on Friday, Beam on Saturday, Xander on Sunday, and then we'll kind of go from there. If you want to flip-flop and mix things up, say you wanted to have Xander go to Friday, then would you, if you make it to Supers, you're going to have Xander go on Friday again? You know what I'm saying? It kind of messes some things up a little bit. So, Tony Vitello, Frank Anderson are so about routine. And so I'm intrigued with A.J. Causey. If Tennessee goes up 6-7 runs there in the first couple innings, would you elect to hold A.J. Causey for later in the weekend? I say you do. Luke, in a moment, will say probably not, because Tony Vitello is such a creature by habit that he'll probably throw A.J. Causey on Friday, because that's when A.J. Causey throws in long relief. So, we'll see. We'll see. Wouldn't it be great to have Causey in your back pocket for Monday if you needed him, or Causey to come in and throw long relief on Sunday if you needed him, or on Saturday if you needed him? But you do want to get him out there. Like, you don't want to just hold that ace in your back pocket and not play it. You know what I'm saying? So we'll see what happens. But that's Northern Kentucky. And then the last team I'll kind of break down here before I turn things over to Luke Lipsius is Indiana, the 3 seed. This is the team that I've not talked about hardly at all this week. I don't think anybody's, covering Tennessee in the Knoxville Regionals even brought up Indiana as much as the other two teams because they're not flashy. They're lucky to be in the field. They were very much a bubble team, 32-24-1. Yes, they have tied. I believe it was a game against Rutgers because Rutgers had no lights and they played till dark. I mean, I'm reading a book. It's called If I Never Get Back. It's about a reporter from the 1990s that is transported back to 1869 following the Cincinnati Red Stockings. If you haven't read it, I promise you it's a great read. It's a really great read. In fact, one night on the Monday Night Chat, or maybe it was a thread on the board, somebody mentioned that as being a really, really good book. And I'm like, man, I'm looking for something else to read here. So I've been reading it. It's called If I Never Get Back. Daryl Brock wrote it. Really, really good book. Can't wait to read the sequel. I'm almost done with it. But anyway, it talks about in the book how they play and they play and they play, and then it gets dark and you can't play no more, right? I mean, it's 2024. How do you tie at a baseball game? Goodness gracious. Anyway, that's my tangent there. Indiana, it seems got the 55th highest RPI, 37th in strength of schedule, 6-10 in quad one records. ERA is at 6.02. Batting average is at 295. The lineup's not horrible. Devin Taylor leads that. Shortstop Tyler Kearney's pretty good player. Carter Matheson, who is usually, and Joe will make mention of this here in a moment, usually one of the star players. Not so much this year, but still has 13 home runs. Connor Foley is the arm, and I would assume that he will pitch out of the gates on Friday. 4-1, 3.71 ERA. Ethan Phillips, another righty, 4-0, 6.21 ERA. Another righty, very right-handed heavy. Ty Rabarski, 2-2, 7.06 ERA. They've both made 9 starts on the season. But I think that if Indiana were to face Tennessee on Saturday, potentially, that it would be Ty Bothwell. He's 6-3, a 4.90 ERA. He's made 9 starts, but 17 appearances. He's kind of that Swiss Army knife in the bullpen there, kind of like a Nate Snead, even A.J. Causey for Tennessee. That is who I could see Indiana starting if they square it off with Tennessee on Saturday night. So we'll see what happens. But Indiana, probably the more balanced team of all the teams in the Knoxville Regional outside of Tennessee, but not a whole lot of flash. Pitching really struggled at the beginning of the season. It got better, which is why they're in a regional. Finished 3rd place in the Big Ten regular season, made it to the semifinals this past weekend for the Big Ten tournament. So that is a little bit of a scout on Indiana. On tomorrow's preview, I will have all this stuff listed, names, stats. I will have a quote from Joe Healey. I'll have a quote from Tony Vitello on every club. I mean, tomorrow's preview, I'm trying to lie, I'm pretty proud of it. Tomorrow's preview is pretty in-depth, getting you ready for the Knoxville Regional. One note on A.J. Russell. We asked Tony Vitello on Wednesday if A.J. Russell will be available, and he simply said he didn't know. Later, I rounded back, not necessarily to A.J. Russell, but just to get an injury report for the team overall, because I mentioned on the board last weekend that Reese Chapman was dealing with a little bit of a leg thing. He's going to be fine. He's good to go, but that's why he wasn't in the lineup those last 2 games in Hoover. So I wanted to make mention, ask about the team as a whole, and he pretty much went right back to AJ, and he's like, yeah, AJ is kind of the one that you don't know if he'll be available or not. So listen, all I can say is Tennessee's done this by the book. Tennessee has not rushed him back. I know a lot of keyboard warriors on the board sometimes want to say Tennessee's doing him a disservice. That is completely against logic, because that is not true. You have a team at Frank Anderson and Tony Vitello, along with Jeff Wood, the athletic trainer. You have the parents. You have A.J. Russell. I mean, they're all doing this together. And they have been careful, and they have been very diligent in this whole process all year long. And even Tony said, hey, we've kind of pressed it as much as we can press it at this point. So we will just have to see if he does pitch this weekend or at all the rest of the year. I mean, it's only going to be about 1 inning, couple outs. And so, and I wrote this in the 3-2-1, and Tony kind of said this yesterday. It's like, well, thankfully, Tennessee's been okay without him. You want him, but Tennessee's been okay without him. So at the time of this recording, my opinion, A.J. Russell will not be active this weekend, but we will see. I'll continue to poke around and talk, and hopefully we'll get word on Friday if he made that active roster or not. But even if he does make that active roster, again, this is not the guy that's going to come in and start you game 1 of supers and pitch 7 innings. It's just not it. It's too late for that. So hope the best for A.J. Russell for sure. But at this time of this recording, I wouldn't expect him to be on the active roster just from conversations I've had, off the record throughout the week. So we will see for sure. All right, let's get into Luke Lipsius. He's coming up next. Then we'll go right into Joe Healey of D1 Baseball. Some great stuff here on the porch today. But first, before we get into Luke, I want to pay tribute to my friends over at Spivey King and Spivey LLP. You got a problem? Let them find a solution for you. TN Trial Lawyers, Matthew A. Spivey, J. Matt King, Richard A. Spivey. They specialize in criminal defense, family law, personal injuries, DUI, assaults, divorce, custody, alimony, personal injuries such as car wrecks, accidents. 80 years of combined experience. Spivey King and Spivey LLP provides representation throughout the state and federal courts of Northeast Tennessee. The firm has a vast amount of trial experience. This practice has been in place for 43 years with this specific partnership since 2012, while also having partners who are energized and ready for today's modern legal demands. Practicing primarily in Northeast Tennessee, the Tri-Cities of Sullivan County, as well as Hawkins County, Washington counties, and surrounding counties. Whether you have been injured in a car accident, need help with a divorce, custody of your children, or have been accused of a crime, Spivey King and Spivey LLP is here to help you. 142 Cherokee Street in Kingsport, Tennessee, 423-245-4185 for a free consultation, or visit them online at SpiveyKingandSpiveyLLP.com. That is SpiveyKingandSpiveyLLP.com. If you got a problem, let them find a solution for you. That is TN Trial Lawyers. All right, Luke, we got so much to talk about and just a little bit of time, so I don't want to waste any of that time. Let's go ahead and dive into it. The Knoxville Regional. You got Tennessee, of course, the #1 overall seed. Ooh. Number 2 is Southern Miss. Number 3 is Indiana. Number 4 is Northern Kentucky. Thoughts initially, and then kind of as you've kind of digested it and went and looked at some of these teams, what do you think about Tennessee's draw here in Knoxville?
Yeah, I think just it's a normal draw that we're used to seeing. It's 3 really good teams. These other teams are getting NJIT in these no-name schools, and of course we get Northern Kentucky, Southern Miss, and Indiana. And those are all fairly big name schools, even in the mid-major scope. So it's nothing new. 22 when we hosted, we had Georgia Tech, Campbell, those guys, and then we had Wright State come to us in 21. So I think Tennessee in general is used to drawing the short end of the stick when it comes to being picked for a regional, especially being the #1 overall seed. I mean, as if we didn't have enough stacked against us being the #1 overall seed and trying to break the curse. I think it was 18 of the last 19 #1 overall seeds have not won a championship. So it's whatever. I think it'll be a really competitive regional. And we were talking about it earlier. I think it'll be a very offensive regional, which again, I think the committee loves to put a bunch of offensive teams in Knoxville just to see how many homers they can be hit, which I mean, isn't good for the school because we lose a bunch of baseballs, but whatever. But either way, I think it's a good draw. And, yeah, there it is. What is it since? Oh, Jesus,
Since 1999. 1999. Yeah. I was going to ask you, man, like, I know you were on this 2022 team that was #1 overall, seed and all that, but how much stock do you kind of put in this curse or whatever? Because, I mean, again, I don't buy into it too much, but it's right there. It hadn't happened since 99.
It's so funny. Like, I think it just shows the fickleness of baseball and how it's different than other sports. You got like a dominant team like Georgia, and they've won the national championship in football, whatever it was, 2 of the last 3 years or whatever it was. I can't remember. But then, like you see here, your dominance during the season doesn't necessarily matter because regional play is quite literally a whole nother season. And, the coaches preach that it's another season because it really is. It doesn't matter how good you are. It just matters how hot you're playing. And we see that in the past with teams like actually last year's Vol team. They were hot going into Omaha, just not hot enough. But yeah, just to kind of, finish my thought, it's a good regional. And then of course they put Southern Miss there for the whole rematch. So, and we mentioned it too, no surprises really anywhere. I'm just excited to watch them get going, especially after a really good week in Hoover.
And we'll get to that really good week in Hoover in a second. And, of course you and I were talking about it, but I mean, everybody that follows college baseball and specifically Tennessee baseball knew back in like March that either Wake Forest is going to be the 2 in the Knoxville Regional, or they were going to be in that regional that's kind of matched up for a potential showdown just to get that storyline, right? Chase Burns, such a big part of Tennessee's program in 22 and 23, leaves, go to Wake Forest. So you're right. I mean, trying to grow the game, storylines, it's all great and everything. But at the end of the day, too, it's just like, oh, Wake, Greenville Regional, I got it. I saw that. Oh, Southern Miss, just got Tennessee last year, now back in Knoxville. Okay, whatever. Like, it's a lot of the, I'm excited about it, but it's a lot of, like, the roll the eyes, kind of lazy, I guess.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's what everyone expects, and I guess it will be good for the fans. We say that now, but if Chase Burns did end up playing back in Knoxville, like how cool would that be? But yeah, it's just one of those things that you let the committee kind of do what they want, and it's really not up to you. So you just kind of got to roll with the punches. But again, yeah, matching up with that Greenville Regional, I would like to see ECU make it out of it. Well, for one, because I think Wake Forest is a scary team when they're
Yeah.
on. But also just like for them, they've been grinding. They've were really good back when I was maybe coming out of high school, kind of slumped down, but then I've hit a little bit of a resurgence. So I think that's a good regional to be paired with, and of course you got the storylines everywhere. So like I said, it'll be fun. We got to just make it out of our regional first, though.
Yeah, you don't want to be that list. You want to be on that list I just showed of the number one overall seed that couldn't get out of regionals. There was a couple of those on that list, but it just kind of goes to show you just how tough this sport is. And a guy that's played in many postseason games and in regionals and supers and of course Omaha. What's that switch like? I mean, you go from Hoover to hosting a regional. It's a new season. It's literally do or die. Kind of what's that like as a player in that mindset? Do you want to change anything? Do you get tight? I mean, what's your mindset going through this week right now?
So the benefit of playing in the SEC and in front of a fan base that gets rowdy for you is that even during that SEC schedule, many games will feel like a regional game. And there'll be times when you're playing, Florida or Vandy or whatever, and you look around and you're like, this is a regional. So it's nothing they haven't seen before, especially playing in front of 15,000 in Hoover. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but Lindsey Nelson does not pack that many people. I don't care if you're stacking people on top of each other. But yeah, so they've gotten all the experience they need as far as handling the big situations. So for them, really, it is just another. You can think of it as a 3-game series with different cards in your pocket, but it is just another game. And I know that's what the coaches are preaching, because that's what they preach to us, that they are ready for this situation and for this tournament.
You break down these teams kind of one by one. We'll go Southern Miss first. Tennessee, of course, lost game 1 in Supers last year on the road at Southern Miss, came back in dramatic fashion, winning games 2 and 3. Going to Omaha, it was kind of the last swan song there for their manager and Scott Berry. They had a really good shortstop. I'm blanking on his name. They had a really good starting pitcher.
Yes.
But a lot of these same guys still on the Southern Miss team, but kind of a new team. It's a team that's won 15 of the last 16 games. They won the Sun Belt tournament in dramatic fashion, and it's a program that, yeah, sure, it's a mid-major, but like you said earlier, man, they know how to play in regionals. Like, this is nothing new for them. So this is probably, I'm not saying anyone's out there saying, well, Tennessee's going to get upset, but if you were going to pick like a trendy 2 somewhere, Southern Miss would certainly be in that conversation.
And that's the thing. Southern Miss is one of those mid-majors that has historically had a really good program. They're in Mississippi, which is kind of a good baseball area, and they produce talent year after year. And then, coming off of last year's super regional loss, I tell you who else came off of a super regional loss the year before they won a super regional is Notre Dame. So yeah, I would watch out for Southern Miss, especially with those veteran guys. Now, that's not to say if we play our game, we can't beat anyone in the nation. We can. But it's one of those things you're almost glad that you got the second game, because that winning on Friday night in a regional is so huge. Just because you don't have to win twice again on Sunday if that game were to come, and for many other reasons, momentum and stuff. But yeah, that team is scary. But again, I mean, they're nothing to be too feared. They hit the ball pretty well. They pitch pretty well. So it's nothing too scary. But yeah, the thing that scares you most, or should, is a team of veterans, because they will know how to play the game. They know how to handle situations. So just watch out. If we play our game, we'll be just fine.
When talking about this Knoxville Regional, the team that nobody is even spending time on is Indiana, and a couple of my write-ups this week, I've kind of not intentionally, but I've kind of almost dismissed them, because I'm saying it's a team that should be better, much better than what it was. It was on the bubble. It got in. Finished 3rd in the Big Ten standings. Okay. Didn't do much in the tournaments. Got a couple all-conference players, but, I mean, everybody I've spoke to, and I had, Joe Healey of D1 Baseball on the show, or I'm going to have him on the show after you, and he kind of just said, hey, they're lucky to be in, and they're probably the most balanced team of Northern Kentucky and Southern Miss, but it's a team that should have been a whole lot better than what it was, and it's just kind of been underperforming. On the flip side, though, boy, if they turned it on this week, it'd be a bad week for Tennessee, right?
Yeah. Like I said, they are kind of flying under the radar. But again, Indiana is another team that you hear about them in the postseason year
Yeah.
after year after year. They are not shying away from this opportunity. And so it's another one of those teams. If they're getting hot at the right time, you do have to watch out. And I think what V does a really good job of is making sure that we don't play down to the competition or don't like take anything really for granted. So it's like I said, they're just a good team in the Big Ten is an average team in the SEC. So we've been there, and so it's you don't want to get too cocky, but also you got to realize you are the better team and let that confidence take you and let you just play and do what you need to do. So we'll see what happens with that game before us. I believe we play the night game. They'll have the game before. So we'll get to see what both of those teams are made of, which is always nice.
And just in perspective, that team that Tennessee swept, it was early in the year, of course. I think the Fighting Illini have kind of evolved since then, but Tennessee swept Illinois at Lindsey Nelson Stadium, and Illinois won the Big Ten this year. So It just kind of goes to show you, again, how much better this conference is than that conference. But you got Indiana's a 3, and then Northern Kentucky, man. I was talking with somebody the other day, and I was like, man, this game is going to have at least a combined 20 runs, right?
Yeah.
Because Northern Kentucky is 5th in the nation in runs scored, right behind Tennessee. They can score, they can hit with the best of them. OBP, average, nationally top 10. But they just can't throw it. They can't throw it at all. They had an all-conference pitcher that has a 7 ERA. So it's one of those teams opening night, Friday night, to where, it's going to be no slouch, man. They're going to put some hits on Tennessee pitching, and you just got to be able to tag them again, right?
Yeah, and with offense, we have it. It's one of those things where you're not concerned about other teams scoring too many runs just because we do have that whole big inning threat. But again, you say it's gonna be a 20-20 game, but then you look at a game like the SEC championship where everyone's out of pitching, the wind's blowing out, and it's a tight game, whatever 5-4, 4-3, whatever it was, and it's one of those things where it's almost like you psych yourself out. You're like, oh, it's going to be high scoring, and then it's not, and it's like, oh, it's just a baseball game, But on the flip side, I do think that this one will score a lot. I think our staff is good enough to hold them in check. Again, you never know. It's so weird with the mid majors. You never know if those numbers are inflated or if they're true. Because and it just I'm kind of traumatized by Wright State because that truly was the best offense that we saw that year. And you didn't know how good they were. You heard about their good players and this and that, but is it because they play in a lesser conference, or it's hard to tell. So I think that the first 3 or 4 innings, we'll see how comfortable their swings are against Stom, and then kind of go from there and gauge the game. But right now, it's really up in the air as to how good of an offense they truly have.
And talking with some people this week, and I tried to ask Tony about this in front of a camera in a roundabout way, and he pretty much just said he didn't envision anything changing. It feels like Tennessee's going to stay with, Stom, starting game 1, Beam in game 2, Xander in game 3. I do think, Luke, and tell me what you think about this. Say Tennessee does jump out to a 5-0 lead early on against Northern Kentucky. Maybe you stretch Stamos out a little bit, and then maybe you turn to somebody else. That way, you're hanging on to Kazi. Worst case scenario, he can start a game. If you play 4, he can come in long relief behind Beam or behind Xander or whoever. I don't see the starters changing per se, but maybe how you use a Kazi behind somebody might change depending on, the game situation on Friday.
Logically, that makes a lot of sense. But then knowing Tony V and how superstitious he is, there is no way he's going to switch up the mojo. Like if he didn't put Kazi out there, I would be so surprised. But again, it would not be a bad thing to do. It's one of those things where you got to manage the staff, but also you want to still go out there and play your game. I do think that it would probably be more detrimental to not throw Kazi just for his rhythm's sake. I know he's in the relief role, but still he's used to going long innings on Friday.
He pitches every Friday. Yeah,
exactly. And so I'd like to see him still pitch on that Friday, especially with the guys behind him, especially with that big guy Marcus Phillips doing what he did. In that semifinal game, man, that was awesome. So it's these guys, and that's exactly what I wanted to happen out of the tournament. And we're probably going to discuss it later, but guys stepping up in the postseason is exactly what you need going down the stretch. So I think the staff is going to do what they have been doing just because the pieces are coming together and everyone's getting confidence.
Yeah, Tony has he's not changed his starting pitchers going into regional play since he's been the head coach here at
Yep.
Tennessee. So I think that's really important to remember. Now it might have changed it a couple weeks before the end of the regular season, but
Yep.
going into regionals he hadn't changed. So yeah, let's get to Hoover, man. Wow, what a week. We'll start there with
Mhm.
what you were talking about. Banky, not the greatest week. Deloy, wow. What I mean,
Mhm.
he got I think he threw a total of 8 pitches on Wednesday, but every Tennessee pitcher, it was a bullpen game. They got touched up by Vanderbilt on Wednesday. What he did in the title game in long relief was incredible. That was awesome to
Mhm.
see. And then you had Phillips, wild thing, really. I mean, it was all over the place a little bit, but high leverage situations. I looked down in the bullpen in the ninth inning. Nobody was getting warm. This was his game, and he closed it out. Combs coming in. Kirby put some base runners on. Combs came in, allowed 2 of those to score, but tying run at second, 2 outs. He slams the door shut for the title win. Again, Combs is Combs. We know who he is, but Phillips and Deloy, I feel better now about the pitching than I have all year. And to your point, that is exactly how you want to be heading into this new season, this postseason.
Yep, and that's exactly right. And the coaching staff is feeling the same way. Is that having confidence in 2 more guys for this tournament? Let's say we do hopefully not lose that game 1. It means that we can come back. I mean, winning 4 games after losing a first game is incredibly hard, especially in Hoover. And it just shows that we do have the depth and that those guys will step up when it matters. And like you said, it's the high leverage situations that you pay more attention to than anything else, just because you see a lot of pitchers, if they start struggling, it snowballs. The pitchers that can get themselves out of it are the ones that you're like, all right, I can trust you because I know that, it's just, I don't know, a little blip here as opposed to, oh God, here we go again. So what we saw out of Loy and Phillips, Loy was absolutely incredible, dude. They just couldn't touch him. And that was the hottest their team in the SEC. They were scoring like 11 runs a game in that tournament. So for him to do what he did in the championship, just confidence for those 2 and confidence for the pitching staff. Dude, I would never advise playing 5 games in Hoover before the regional, but if you come out with the championship, go for it. Why not?
And again, it's not like they were trying to lose, but I mean, Tony had a clear strategy. It was like, all right, I want to do a bullpen game. Well, that makes sense because that a bullpen game on Tuesday. He wanted to get Peoples in there. He wanted to rest Dean Curley. He wanted to see what Billy Barrels looked like as the DH. I mean, he was trying some different things, and they just kept winning and winning and winning.
I know, and that Vandy team, they were just smacking the ball. It's what we hadn't seen. I think they were like close to last in a bunch of offensive categories, and then this tournament, like those first 3 games, they were scoring near 10 runs a game. So you just kind of run into a really hot team, and then of course that Wednesday game is so funky to manage, just because you want to keep your guys on a schedule. You just you gotta hope that your midweek guys can kind of carry you. And in this case, they did what they could, but I think it was more running into a really, really hot offense versus them actually pitching poorly,
How big was it to see Billy Amick get that home run? I mean, that was the offense for Tennessee on Sunday, but going into that home run blast, he was 0 for 17 on the week with 5 strikeouts. And, a couple of games he was hitting it hard just right at people, but what a monster hit to hopefully kind of get him going.
Yeah, it's baseball, so you got to ride the wave. I'm hoping that was the trough, and now he's just going to go straight up, because that would be awesome to see him just carry the momentum of that homer. Because it not only was it such a big homer for the game, but like I don't know if like when you were watching, you could feel something happening. It was like, okay, you're almost there, you're almost there, almost there. He was swinging and missing. It's like, dude, you're just right there. And then he hits it, and you're like, all of a sudden, big sigh of relief that he now has a hit, and going into the regional, we can rest easy. I think he's going to be prepared for a huge weekend in Knoxville this weekend. That's my prediction for Billy, especially knowing how good of a hitter he is.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, honestly, it was kind of like you have all these boxes you want to check, and I'm using the same analogy that Tony used going into Hoover, and I apologize, but you wanted to see some depth of your pitchers. Okay, Phillips, Loy, check. You wanted to get your DH position spot in the lineup, kind of feeling some confidence. Reese Chapman had a great week. Check. Cannon Peebles looked pretty good. Check. Dalton Bargo did some things. I was like, okay, well, that's good. You wanted to get Dean Curley feeling better, and he did in a big way. So, they won the whole thing, but, man, I thought they accomplished a lot of things that you wanted to see kind of rectified before heading into postseason, and they did that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because that's the stuff that doesn't get talked about in the
Yeah.
media. Everyone's going to talk about the win, the homers, blah blah blah. But like you said, it's the little things that mean the most, and it's getting those pitchers in not only innings but confidence. It's getting these hitters that were kind of slumping more confidence and back to themselves. So like you said, everything that needed to happen for these guys to be successful happen in that tournament. So I'm very excited for this regional, and I think that they have a really strong chance of going far.
What did you make of the near brouhaha with Tennessee and Mississippi State there on that Friday night? I mean, it looked like, who knows if Tony started it or whatever, but it was apparent they were barking at Tony. He said something back, and then that assistant coach had to be restrained. How in the world he was not ejected from the game? How in the world, thankfully, Christian Moore wasn't ejected when he slammed his hat and glove down and wanted to fight. But you had Semo, Blake Burke, and Cal Stark walking towards you ready to throw hands. I thought there was about to be something there for a moment, but kind of it's baseball, it's fun, but a little bit of a moment there on Friday night.
So I am all for the passion and the chirping because I just think it's so fun and it makes the next couple of ABs and innings that much more exciting. I don't know how it started. I think it was the whole Cal Stark, dropped a foul ball or something, and then I don't know, that guy got on. If you're an assistant coach, you should never be that far out of the dugout, like unless it's beef with another coach, maybe. But he was yelling at the kids. It's like, dude, what are you doing? You're just making a fool of yourself. Let the kids play, so to speak. But yeah, I like our team's. I like our team's chances in a fight. You never know what Stemo's going to do. He's very feisty. So he's the one you got to worry about as far as getting ejected goes. But, it's one of those things that I don't think anything was ever really going to happen of it. You love to see it. And we were sitting there watching. It's like, oh, it'd be so cool if he struck him out this next pitch. Of course, they got the better end of Combs in the two singles and whatever it was, 3 runs. But then, it led to the Burke home run where I don't know if you saw the video. The kid was like, hey, 25, you stink. And then he hits a homer. So it seemed like that last, 3 innings or whatever it was like almost a movie with how it played out. So that was so cool.
Yeah, it was wild. Tennessee had a comfortable lead. Beam gives up that lead. It's a tie game. He exits. And then, Beam was more animated than I've ever seen him in my life. He was pumping up the crowd. Like, he was still being Beam, though. He was waving off the outfielders from running into the fight. So, he was still doing that. But,
if I can interject, he had the weirdest line that night because it was like 5 innings or 6 innings, 2 hits, and 5 earned runs. And it's just, it's crazy. And it goes to show you how much watch, but continue.
Yeah, one was like, gosh, there were so many games last week. One guy reached via an error. He hit one guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so, he got some guys on base, but it's not like they were, he gave up three runs off 1 hit in that inning. It was something like that. So, I don't know. It was a fun week. I'm down there covering it, having a good time and everything. They lost. I'm like, all right, it wouldn't be nice to go back and have a little weekend for myself. And then by the time you get to Friday or Saturday, you're like, okay, well, we're still here. Let's win this whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. Let me ask, how was the flyover?
Dude, it was incredible.
So that was the 2021 flyover, that big old plane.
Yeah.
That's what everyone talks about. I saw it coming. I was like, oh my God. And of course, I'm just sitting there watching TV.
Tony said, I guess it was Saturday night, after they beat Vanderbilt, going into the game on Sunday, and he said, man, tomorrow's going to be great. Can't help but get emotional during the national anthem. And I'm just sitting here, I'm like, yeah, okay, cool and everything. But no, this place is packed, first baseline, third baseline, you're singing the national anthem. It's awesome. And then you just see that, it is right there, and it's getting bigger and bigger. And it was, yeah, it was really, really cool. So, it was hard not to get, motivated and, excited, even for me, before that game. Last thing, man, Tennessee, it was no doubt about it. Tennessee was going to be the number 1 overall seed. What a year, sweeping the regular season and tournament championships. I do want to ask you, what makes this team different than maybe that of the one you played on in 2022? I know there's a lot of differences, but if you kind of look at it on paper, it's like, oh, they hit home runs. They swept the conference, number 1 overall seed. What makes these two teams different?
Yeah, so I think that that 2022 team was a little bit more dominant just because of that pitching staff.
I agree.
Which also I think brought more pressure on that team because we were number one for whatever it was, 3 months. And we were, beating everyone. We were letting them know it too. So I think we were not only the number one seed, but like we were the ones that everyone wanted to beat, and not only like teams, but I think the whole nation probably wanted us to lose too. So that's one main difference, and I think that plays into this team's postseason run very well because they're more of a kind of keep your head down and grind. Like they do a little bit of rah-rah stuff, but almost when it's needed. I haven't seen anything crazy. It's almost like you take they're just a bunch of grinders, and I love watching them play because they're all super talented, but they just go about their business. You can tell they still have passion, but they're not flipping off any center fielders. So it's one of those things that they're two definitely very different teams. And I don't know. It's you would have thought that 2022 team would have gone far, but I think just the way this team's playing. There is a lot riding on them, but it's not so much pressure. It's just, them wanting to compete and do well for the Tennessee name and that kind of thing, as opposed to say like, you guys all suck.
You mean nobody's army crawling then touching home plate?
Yeah. It wasn't that crazy.
Yeah. And again, it just goes to show you that you guys bowed out game 3 you were literally an inning or two away from Omaha, but yep. Notre Dame's a good team. That's why it's so incredible. I don't care who you are. It's so incredibly hard, in my opinion, the hardest thing in college sports to win this whole thing. It's just difficult.
It is. It's crazy, but yeah, I'm hoping for good stuff for this team.
We'll see what happens this weekend, man. Regional play kicks off, Tennessee, Northern Kentucky on Friday, and then we'll see from there. Luke, as always, man, appreciate your perspective.
Of course, can't wait.
Hey, Joe, I want to get your thoughts on the Knoxville Regional overall. Tennessee, of course, the host program here. Southern Miss, the 2. Indiana, the 3. Northern Kentucky, the 4. Overall, what do you think about Tennessee's draw and the strength of the Knoxville Regional?
It's a strong one for sure. I would say it's probably, I haven't done a full ranking of it really yet, but I do think it's probably in the stronger half. I think part of that is you've got the familiarity with Southern Miss. Southern Miss has played Tennessee in the postseason. They've got a lot of carryover from that team. And Southern Miss is just a program that's not really going to be overwhelmed by a regional in general because they're there every year. So there's that. Indiana as a 3 is interesting because talent-wise, they're closer to a 2 probably. They frankly underachieved a little bit this season relative to their talent. They played a lot of tough games early in the year and won a decent bit of them. So the fact that they ended up on the bubble was actually kind of a surprise. So those two teams make it a tougher regional. I obviously, as the number 1 overall seed, you're expecting Tennessee to come out of it. So that's that's where I'm at with it. But considering they are the number 1 overall seed, it is a little bit of a tougher regional.
You look at Southern Miss, we'll kind of go team by team here. Again, like we mentioned, Tennessee just squared off with Southern Miss in the Supers last year. There are some guys who are gone, of course, the new head coach this year as well, but still some carryover with that ball club. What do they do well? And as you mentioned, this is a team that, they're in regionals every single year. I think this is their 8th straight 40-win season. It's a team that knows how to play at this stage, and I feel like obviously it's going to be one of these 2 teams coming out of this regional. Yeah,
I think that's fair. Southern Miss is going to be very familiar to Tennessee just because not only did they play them last year, it's kind of the same type of team. It's pitching, it's defense. If they don't get good pitching, they're not going to have success because they don't have the offense to kind of play catch up. And obviously that's a bad matchup stylistically for Lindsey Nelson Stadium against this Tennessee team. But the counterweight to that is that, if anyone can slow down Tennessee a little bit in this regional, it is going to be Southern Miss. Billy Oldham and Nico Mazza at the front of their rotation have both been really, really solid this year. Veteran guys who were part of last year's run as well. It'll be interesting to see how they use those guys because they're in a situation where they obviously they have to take Indiana seriously. But they're probably also thinking a little bit about what they would do pitching-wise in a potential 1-0 matchup with Tennessee on Saturday. So that'll be interesting because they have those 2 guys, and then it's a lot of mixing and matching, which they're comfortable doing. If you look at their stat sheet, they've got several guys relievers who have pitched a lot and pitched multiple innings. And so they're not afraid to play a bullpen game. So that is something that I think helps in regionals, but the key to Southern Miss having success in this regional is they need good starts from those top two guys. Offensively, there's some star power. Slade Wilkes is a guy with some pedigree and a guy who can run the ball out of the ballpark. Dalton McIntyre has been a nice surprise for them. Matthew Russo is a good player, but it's going to be pitching and defense for Southern Miss if they're going to have success.
You mentioned Indiana being a team that's kind of underperformed, and kind of doing my research here at the beginning of the week without diving super far deep down into it. I would somewhat agree. It does feel like Indiana is probably the more balanced team of the three in this regional, all things considered. What does Indiana? Having said that, what does Indiana kind of do well? What does Indiana hang their hat on, if so to speak?
I think it is. I think it is balanced. I mean, if anything, it's that they're a really good offensive club 1 through 9. They put a good lineup out there from top to bottom, even to the point where they have a guy in Carter Matheson who's really, by his standard, not having a great year, hitting 257. But that's a guy who also has 13 bombs. So I mean, he's a guy who's is not the focal point of this lineup right now, but can still hurt you. So that's the big thing. They've also found some things on the mound. Early in the year, that's where the struggle was. When they weren't going well, that's where they were struggling. But they've got Connor Foley as kind of their top arm in terms of starting. Ty Bothwell is a guy who can be used either way. He's got about half and half in terms of starts and relief appearances, veteran guy there. And then they've got a couple arms in the bullpen they're going to lean pretty heavily on. Like, they're another team that's not going to be afraid to go to bullpen early and often. But you're right. Your estimation of it is correct. They are a type of team that can beat you multiple ways. They don't have to do one thing well to win games. The one guy, the name that you got to watch out for is Devin Taylor. I mean, he's a guy who could play and star for basically any SEC club. I mean, he's an SEC type, high-end type of SEC player that happens to be playing it at Indiana. So if he's going well, they're going to be tough to stop offensively. And I guarantee you, Frank Anderson is spending most of his time on Indiana trying to figure out how to get that guy out.
You look at Northern Kentucky, again, a 4 seed, for most fan bases isn't going to scare anybody, and it shouldn't scare Tennessee. Having said that, though, Northern Kentucky, it's an offensive team that likes to hit. It's got, it ranks pretty highly in terms of, national rankings, top 10, in fact, and average and OBP. They're, I believe, 4th in the nation, a couple behind Tennessee. No, 5th in the nation, a couple behind Tennessee with 542 runs that are scored. Having said that, they don't throw it very well. So an incredibly good offensive team for Northern Kentucky, but pitching-wise, it's probably going to be something that hurts them this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I would expect it at best for Northern Kentucky, and this famous last words right here, Eric, but at best for Northern Kentucky, I think it's the type of team that can scare you for about 4 innings if their offense comes out hot and scores, jumps on whoever Tennessee starts in that opener and puts 3 or 4 runs on the board real quick. But then ultimately, yeah, the pitching is just not good enough based on what they've done this year to slow down Tennessee enough to I think, really put a scare in the balls. But you nailed it. Offensively, they are pretty dynamic, and it's not just they can hit the ball out of the ballpark, but they've also stolen 125 bases. And so they're probably going to try to create some chaos. And so if you're Tennessee, you have to kind of slow your heartbeat, stay steady, understand that this is a 9-inning game. And that's the other thing about 4 seeds, they typically come out with a lot of fire and a lot of energy, and they're ready to go. You have to absorb their first punch. And as long as Tennessee can do that, I think they're going to be okay. But that first punch is probably going to come on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I remember talking to you and some others in Hoover this past weekend. And, with Tennessee pitchers, it's like the catchers don't throw anybody out, but the Tennessee pitchers as a group are so slow to the plate that you're not giving your guys a chance. And that's why you see the back picks with Cal Stark. You see the throwovers from Xander Seacrest that just slow the game down. But that's kind of Tennessee's way of managing the run game. And, Friday against Northern Kentucky, we'll probably see a lot of that. You look over at the Greenville Regional. Never want to get ahead of yourself here. It's one game at a time, obviously. But the winner of the Knoxville Regional will take on the winner of the Greenville Regional. Eastern Carolina is the host program there. But as we all knew in college baseball, dating back to March, somehow Wake Forest was going to have an opportunity to play Tennessee with, of course, former starting pitcher turned reliever, turned College World Series hero Chase Burns. Wake Forest is the number 2 seed. What do you like about that Greenville Regional? And are we setting up for a Chase Burns Wake Forest reunion back at Lindsey Nelson Stadium?
It sure seems that way. No disrespect to ECU. Their ECU has questions health-wise. I'm sure some of your listeners know about the Treya Savage situation. He's their big All-American Friday night guy who had a partially collapsed lung last week, which seems not great. Yeah, so thankfully, it seems like he's doing all right, just in terms of his general health. But it's like how much can we expect him to be ready to go and throw 7 innings in a regional game? We'll see. So when you consider that, they've also got a fairly tough 3 in that regional with VCU, which is a scrappy club. And frankly, Evansville. I mean, Evansville's a team that has like a bunch of 23-year-olds. Like, it would not surprise me if Evansville is actually the team that ends up in a regional final there. So ECU, it's one of those situations where, okay, you want to host ECU, you want to be a surprise host. Well, here you go. And teams like Wake Forest are what your nightmares are made of as a host, because Wake Forest is going to try to pitch off, I assume, and save Burns for a Saturday night matchup, because they've got pitchers who they think could handle VCU, and they're probably right about that. So if you're ECU, you're like, great, even if we win that, we got a tough 4 with an old team, and then we're going to go to Saturday and likely have to face Chase Burns. Now, the thing with Wake Forest is that consistency has been a problem. Yeah. If this was all about high-end talent, Wake Forest would be ranked in the top 5. I mean, they're high-end guys, whether it's Burns, whether it's Nick Kurtz, whether it's Seaver King, are as good as anybody else's top-line guys. The problem is the consistency hasn't been there. The depth is not there. Their depth kind of got exposed this year, especially when guys like Nick Kurtz were injured. So it wouldn't shock me if Wake Forest goes 2-0 and looks great, and we're like, here we go. Like, here comes this matchup, and then someone else ends up winning the regional because the depth just isn't good enough. But if that depth can come through, they're a lot more dangerous in a super regional setting than they are in a regional setting, because in a super regional, you're looking at a max 3 games. They can handle that.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. The winner of the Knoxville Regional hosting the winner of the Greenville Regional. Of course, you got to take what's in front of you first and get through regional play. And Tennessee's regional is no slouch. Overall, just kind of looking at the field, kind of out the door here, Tennessee was the obvious number 1 overall seed choice. It's been, you can tell me for sure, I think it's been 25 years since the number 1 overall seed has won the whole thing. There's kind of that curse, if you will. What do you like Tennessee's chances overall? I know it's a grueling process, but it feels like you've seen Tennessee play a handful of times this year. It feels like Tennessee has the makings, and the pitching has gotten deeper as the years gone on, that would allow a team like the Vols to kind of be the last team standing.
Yeah, I mean, your listeners may not like to hear this if they believe in, if we're getting too much sunshine pumped towards us, it's a bad thing. But I turned in my picks last night, and I've got Tennessee winning the national title.
There you
go. It's the best lineup in the country. I've said that all year. A&M is like a honorable mention, right? But I've liked Tennessee's lineup all year. I think it's deeper even than the 2022 lineup. Now, 2022 had these personalities on it that are just so memorable. I think that stands out, but I think this group is deeper. I mean, we saw this weekend, 13, 14 position players get on the field. At this time of year, you don't see that. I mean, the number 2 overall seed, Kentucky, we saw basically 9 guys every single day, and a 10th guy, Patrick Herrera, comes off the bench. Like, Tennessee's not like that. Like, they could throw out any sort of lineup at certain positions, and we saw that this past week. The other thing, you mentioned the pitching. I think they've done it, and Tony Vitello gave kudos to Frank Anderson in his postgame after the championship game, and I think it's in part because they've done a really good job putting together a pitching staff that works with the personnel they have. I think they deserve a lot of credit for not trying to recreate Dolander, Burns, and Beam, and just say, all right, who are our 3 tentpole guys that are going to go out there every weekend and just shove? I mean, you had Beam, so okay, there's one, but then beyond that, they tried some things, but they landed on this kind of weird deal where you've got an opener with Stamos and then Causey behind him. And then you've got Sechrist, who is steady, but sometimes he gives you 6 and sometimes he gets 5 outs. And we're just going to have to understand that those starts kind of go that way sometimes. So I think they've got a really good handle on what their pitching staff does well, what it doesn't do well, and they're not trying to be something they're not on the mound, which I think takes a lot of acumen and takes a lot of willingness to have trial and error, because I think a lot of coaches would have looked at that pitching staff in a traditional way and seen the talent, because there's plenty of talent there, and would have seen that talent and just tried to kind of shove a square peg in a round hole. And when I think Frank has done a really nice job of just saying, look, it is what it is. We're gonna win this way, and they have.
Joe Healey, one of the main guys over there at D1 Baseball. They do an awesome job. Encourage you to go sign up. I follow D1 Baseball. They do weekly podcasts. I've looked at every Field of 64 projection the last couple of weeks, and of course all their articles. They do a great job over there, and Joe is one of the main cats to make it go. So Joe, I appreciate all the time, man. Thanks so much for joining us, and maybe we'll have you on later in postseason play.
Yeah, Eric, happy to do it. Anytime you need me, you got me.
Awesome show. Getting us set for postseason play, getting us set for the Knoxville Regional, and getting you set for Tennessee and Northern Kentucky. And it's coming up Friday night. And, of course, the winner of Indiana and Southern Miss that takes place at 1 o'clock on Friday. We'll await the winner of Tennessee, Northern Kentucky at 6 o'clock on Saturday night. The two losers will get going at around noon, and then we'll see what happens from there. Tennessee is the number 1 overall seed in the country for a reason. Tennessee is a dangerous team. It's got the best lineup in the country, top to bottom, in my opinion. It's got enough pitching, and I am so pumped to see how Tennessee performs in the Knoxville Regional this weekend. Of course, all the coverage for takes, what they said, what coach said, players said, how it happened, some specialty stories, all that and more. You're going to get it at Volquest.com throughout the weekend, and, of course, the Knoxville Regional play. Big thank you to Joe Healey over at D1 Baseball for stopping by and joining the show, giving his perspective on Southern Miss and Indiana and Northern Kentucky. Really do appreciate him and kind of his overall thoughts about Tennessee. Some good stuff there from Joe. And then, as always, Luke Lipsius, the star of the Porch. Love his perspective each and every week. And I thank you for joining us here on the Porch. And it's presented by our friends over at Spivey King and Spivey LLP. You got a problem, let them find a solution for you. That's TN Trial Lawyers. Pick up the phone today for a free consultation if you have the need. That is 423-245-4185, or visit them online at SpiveyKingandSpiveyLLP.com. Spivey King and Spivey. You got a problem, let them find a solution for you. That is TN Trial Lawyers. Thank you guys so much for joining us, for listening to us, for watching us here on the Porch as Tennessee gets set for the Knoxville Regional. It's go time.